one of the things also I wanted to ask you, as someone who is very interested as part of your role in government policy, is there anything or in the things coming through, and we're hearing from the Education Secretary about her priorities, are there things you're thinking, gosh, yes, this is great. I think this could actually be a real positive change in the sector?
Yeah, I think there's a lot in, I'm going to kind of mix my metaphors. There's a lot in the air, there's a lot on the table. I think elements of the direction of travel are clear, but there is not a coherent plan as to the final destination. And I think that makes it quite hard to then connect all of the separate elements. So the things I would say we have in the air, we have Ofsted to an extent. There's very quick action that was taken there that was very responsive to public and sector sentiment in the moment. We don't like one word judgments. We won't have one word judgments. We come into government and we're going to get stuff done. Very powerful. What are we going to have in place? Possibly more judgments in a report card format. Have you kind of classic example of be careful what you wish for? Stuff that is spinning. We know that there will be a new framework and a new report card format. So we've got that sort of element of accountability up in the air. We've got the curriculum assessment and qualification review. So again, we've thrown up what we're teaching, how we know if we've taught it well, and what children are leaving settings with and how they move on to the next step of their education, all up in the air again. And we've got school improvement, because although a lot more schools are good or better, which is not really a metric we can use anymore, because what do we do about the schools that still need a lot more help? And again, that is interdependent on, well, what does the Ofsted process look like? Because the two have to speak to each other, and a real lack of clarity over, well, we're going to get people intervening and making suggestions and advising schools, but who is responsible for doing that improvement work? Very unclear. And that's partly because we've got a two-tier system. We've got half children in academies, over half children in academies, but we still got no real incentive for local authority schools to join trusts. And a lot has changed on that score. So those things are very much up in the air. We've equally got, I think this Labour government have come into power with a really clear understanding of the issues in education. Like, that has been so well rehearsed. They know what the problems are in terms of resetting the relationship with the sector. They know why people are feeling the way that they're feeling. They were able to respond quickly on pay. SEND, we know this is a huge challenge, and it's seen as a broken system. We're talking about it in a system way. But what I feel strongly is we don't have enough money, so we have to change that funding dynamic. How do you do that when children have been guaranteed funding? Like, how do you turn off one funding method,
Turn off the tap.
and start another? We have this sort of statement around, well, we're going to have inclusive practice in mainstream schools. We're going to have more children with special educational needs in schools. We already have that. That's not new.
No.
We're already trying to do that. The thing that's missing, I think, is the workforce, and is the skill and the knowledge within that workforce to deliver that truly inclusive education. But it feels like we're still going to be talking at this system and funding level, much in the same way that we're talking about curriculum and assessment in a structural way. But the barriers that the review is looking to address, closing the gap for children from low income backgrounds and special educational needs, that's about the quality of teaching that they get in so many ways. So it's difficult because it feels that everybody is focusing on sort of structures and systems, but the humans within them are going to be the thing that makes the difference. So there is a crucial piece that I don't think we're hearing enough on necessarily about recruitment, retention. We've heard about these extra teachers, how they're defined or where they're found. We don't know. There's a sort of solution there from government, but it's a sort of, we know what would change, roughly what changes people want, but actually how they happen really need the people in the sector. So I think there's a lot to be hopeful about, particularly on the SEND and inclusion piece and recognition that children need to achieve and thrive at school as well, that really speaks to the kind of growing mental health crisis among young people, that it isn't enough just to be pushed through academic qualifications, that there should also be joy and friendship and human connection and relationships. And schools do this anyway. And I think something of the framing of telling a lot of people it's about achieving and thriving, this is what schools do. So again, you have to be careful in this reset of the relationship, what you imply by saying this is a new thing, and everyone going, well, it's not a new thing. So I think that is really positive. I think the emphasis on child poverty is positive, and Bridget Phillipson kind of co-chairing the Child Poverty Task Force with Kendall is a great thing. And one thing that gave me hope in the election campaign was, from a Conservative perspective, the rhetoric from Rishi Sunak was education is the closest thing we have to a silver bullet when it comes to social mobility. And Bridget Phillipson really strongly acknowledged that this is a connected issue. This is about the community around a child. This is about attendance. This is about engaging with the family and understanding their background and supporting them as a whole. You can't just educate a child out of poverty, because the school alone cannot do it. But where we get to with child poverty, where there's seeming reluctance to remove the benefit cap, and what difference initiatives will really make if we don't get growth going and actually people being in better paid work, remains to be seen. But I think that again, the positioning and the understanding that this is not school's problem alone to solve is really important. And I would encourage people to engage with government consultations and speak up, speak out about what you feel one way or the other, because there's a real sense of listening, and there's just a lot of things yet to be decided. Yeah, interesting times for policy watchers like me.
Yes, definitely. Yeah, lots of good intentions in the air and a lot of details still to be worked out.
Absolutely.
Gosh, yes, feels like lots of things we could return to and have longer conversations about. But for now, let's just wrap up with, do you have any recommended reads or listens, things that are inspiring you recently at the moment?
I would definitely encourage people on that last question to listen to Bridget Phillipson being interviewed by Freddie Whitaker from Schools Week on the Schools Week 10-year podcast. It's really great because he works magic, because he asks the questions we want him to ask, but he gets her to keep talking, and we don't get that sort of politicians answering. It's not combative. It's not the Today program. It's just a very two sensible people having a conversation. So I think it's really accessible and gives you a real good sense of who the Secretary of State is and what she's about. And, we have a huge reason to be cheerful in Bridget Phillipson, the Secretary of State. This is somebody who was on preschool field, who lived the journey that many of us would hope for our pupils, and is now in a position to do something about it. And that's the problem with education secretaries. Often they are a bit too coloured by their educational background one way or the other, and it can be a negative force, but hopefully this is a really positive one. So I'd really recommend that. And again, on that policy point, Schools Week have done a brilliant document looking back over 10 years of education policy. And again, particularly if you're newer to the sector and you caught the tail end of lots of conversations and thought, what is also all about? It's a really useful way to go through, particularly things like academy policy, and see how they've developed over the last 10 years. So I'd strongly recommend those. And on the sort of operational effectiveness piece, and this is not my area of expertise, but I've definitely read them and passed them on to other people. I would recommend ISBL, the Institute of School Business Leadership, and their compact looking at operational effectiveness, really useful thinking in that.
Yeah, that's right. Absolutely. Goes, doesn't it, very much to a kind of customer focused approach, and going back to the idea we were talking about of looking for efficiencies and where can you save time, where can you make the processes better. Amazing. Thank you so much, Caroline. You've given us lots of food for thought. Good.
Thank you. Goodbye.